My name is Mike Platt. I'm a principal with Inside Public Accounting. And on behalf of our entire team, I want to welcome you to today's webinar focused on exploring one of the solutions being used successfully today to address the growing staffing shortage, which is affecting so many firms. Throughout IPA's many years of practice management research of well over 1,000 firms, we know that staffing, specifically recruiting, retention, and development, has been the number one or the number two issue on the mind of every accounting firm for decades. As we all know, shifting demographics, the 5-year school requirement, and fewer accounting graduates have collided with differing views of work, work-life balance, and frankly, patience with career advancement, which collectively have put really huge pressures on the traditional views of the supply side of providing public accounting services. Especially with the accelerated and enormous disruption caused by COVID-19 and the subsequent Great Resignation, finding staff to keep up with the demands of successful public accounting firms have been top of mind for most firms, with some even turning away business because they can't staff engagements. IPA is committed to helping to uncover best practices and solutions to practice management issues. And that has brought us here today as co-host of this webinar to learn about one such staffing solution in use by many firms, which can help ease the staffing pressures being felt by so many. So without further delay, let me turn it over to our moderator of today's discussion, Ryan Najmulski at Makosi, to help us understand one firm's experience with this staffing solution. Ryan, over to you.
Mike, thank you very much, and then thanks for having us today. Good morning or good afternoon to you all, depending where you're located. As Mike mentioned, my name is Ryan Najmulski, and I lead client success at Makosi. For the last 10 years, I have worked with public accounting and financial firms to help them get a handle on their talent approach. Today, I have the absolute pleasure of hosting this discussion around using on-demand talent strategically to outsource your audit needs. I'd like to take a quick moment to introduce our esteemed panel this afternoon. So I am joined by Christine Thomas. Christine is the Executive Vice President of Talent Alignment at Dixon Hughes Goodman, where she oversees strategic resourcing. Christine has a background starting as a tax professional, as well as serving in a variety of internal client service functions, including financial operations and resource management. Welcome, Christine. Also joining us today is Wayne Kaplan, audit industry veteran and former managing partner at Grant Thornton. Wayne's background is in both SEC and non-SEC engagements. Wayne currently serves as a board member at Makosi, helping to drive Makosi's strategy and positioning in the industry. And our third panelist today is Paul Emery, Chief Experience Officer and co-founder at Makosi. Paul helped start Makosi to help firms strategically adopt a flexible workforce backed by people and technology. Makosi builds on this aim to guide firms to the future of accounting by simultaneously tackling a mission to put 10,000 kids through school in developing communities. Thank you all for my panelists for joining today, and let's get right into it. So my first question is for you, Wayne. Wayne, welcome. Why should firms be looking at creative solutions to their workforce?
You're on mute. The catchphrase
let me get
2020.
My answer would come out much more articulately if I'm off mute. So here we go. So first of all, thanks, Ryan, and thanks everybody for joining us today, and thanks for the warm introduction. When I get this question, I always start saying, the easy answer to that question of, why and how firms should be looking at creative workforce solutions. The easy answer, and perhaps the wrong answer, is because of the pandemic. Frankly, it's a lazy answer. As an industry veteran, as you said, of 30 years, the endless hamster wheel of hire, fire, deal with the resignation, make a counteroffer, and then do it all over again for 30 years really has had a dramatic and continues to have a dramatic impact on the cultures of the firms. So without getting too soft in the answer, I really think it boils down to the cultural impact of this hire, fire, rinse, repeat cycle that the firms have really dealt with over the years. And aside from the hard costs of turnover that creates, and I think the rule of thumb that we always operated on was expect 24% turnover or thereabouts at the senior associate level. There's other sort of less clear costs involved. I mean, think about the impact on our high performers of that model just repeating itself over and over and over again. And the reward for being a superstar in your organization is, guess what? More work, less work-life balance. And then you show up at the partner promotion process and everybody asks, well, what did the superstar do in terms of practice development? Well, they were charging 2,500 hours a year. That's what they did. And that's why they didn't have any practice development experience and expertise. Other costs that aren't as obvious, the turnover impact on our clients and client service. I mean, everybody in this industry has lived through the client frustrations of seeing a different face every year. And that cost is just immeasurable. And last but not least, and probably the least obvious, is the impact on succession planning of the firms. I mean, there's a dearth of leadership, I think, throughout the industry. There certainly was at my old firm, really as the end result of all of this, churning of staff, especially at the midpoint of folks' careers. So long-winded answer, but I do think, the creative solutions that need to be looked at from a cultural perspective, much more so than a short-term financial perspective.
Thank you, Wayne. And Christina, I would love to hear your opinion on this as well. Why should firms be looking at creative solutions to their workforce?
Well, I just think more and more we're seeing a shift in the experience that individuals want. There's this hunger to learn more and do have different experiences. And sometimes it's a season of life thing. They want a different balance or a different flexibility. And so, when I just think about like the gig workforce and how many people are entering it, I mean, it's staggering some of the statistics that are out there. I mean, I know Forbes published some information done in a survey by Upwork and freelancers that suggests that, by 2027, we could have more people in kind of this gig independent contractor, more unique model than even full-time employees. And so I think just leaning in and figuring out how we engage individuals where they are and what they want to be doing. And some of that's just that flexibility and diversity that I think getting creative with how we use a workforce and build a team is super important, right? Because not everybody is looking for that same traditional experience that they might have had, as we see, right? Nutrition's not going away. If anything, it's going up. So how can we really develop other, means of having a diverse group of people?
Thank you, Christine. And a reminder to all, yes, please drop your questions in the Q&A chat. I'll either be including them as it relates to the conversation or we'll get to it at the end. Thanks, Christine. So next question is for you, Paul. So as it relates to creative solutions in the workforce, where does Makosi fit into this ecosystem?
Gotcha. So I think we speak to a lot of firms, and there's probably 4 or 5 strategies that firms should be employing at any one time, but we really kind of come in at that senior associate level, that 3 to 6 years worth of experience. That's our sweet spot. And that's really what we're trying to tackle on the other side in terms of our employment model with the auditors in which we're hiring, is really trying to change that so we can attract those numbers to exactly what Christine was talking about there in terms of them having different needs, right? This, it's a little bit overused, but this idea of that they don't want a 9 to 5. They want an adventure, they want a career, they want to be working towards something larger than themselves. And so that's what we've done on our employment model, is give them that huge amount of choice in terms of where they can do their work. And then also we're a for impact company. It's not a parenting goal. There's 10,000 kids up above me. It's actually a commitment we've made as a firm to put 10,000 children in developing countries through school. And all of our 1,200 employees actually get to work on those engagements. So just little things like that is really helping change this narrative and appeal and keep people in the industry because they feel like they're working towards a bigger model. But our model doesn't help with like at the graduate level. We can help up to manager, but then it's kind of senior manager and above. That's where, again, we stop. So it's really that 3 to 6 year worth of experience is our sweet spot.
Great, and thank you, Paul. Can you just clarify for everyone, what is the difference between an on-demand audit solution and using a traditional option such as a staffing firm?
Yeah, I think that's really important because I think a lot of clients haven't heard about this type of working before. And just naturally, you're trying to compartmentalize it in your head. You kind of say, okay, is this outsourcing? Is this like an India operation, or are you a staffing company? And we've been around 15 years. And really what we found in the first couple of years, we were literally just saying, hey, you need people, we've got people. But that big problem of finding people, whilst it's even harder today, once you've found those people, you almost switch that one big problem for like 10 others. And that's, how do I onboard these people? How do I train them up? How do I make sure that they're delivering once they're on site? How do I ensure continuity for my clients? All of those sorts of things. And that's what an on-demand model is. They should be holistically helping with that, and really helping getting guys ready as it relates to, so Christine's team at DHG is getting them DHG ready. It's not about giving you just a good quality auditor. It's a good quality auditor that knows your culture, who to go to for technical tax questions. What's the audit methodology? How does managers like working papers? All of these sorts of things we work with our firms to figure out up front, and then we build a client playbook. So you're getting value from day one, and really think of these guys as like insourcing. So these are client-facing auditors. Again, it's up to you exactly how you use them, but this is the caliber of staff in which they're coming in. And so it's very different from an outsourcing like an India operation, or just a true staffing play, because these are our full-time employees. So it gives firms like DHG and the great opportunity to say, hey, I had a really good experience with Paul this year, and can he come back next? And yeah, you can. You got an 83% chance to redeploy the same person up to 12 months out.
Great, thank you, Paul. So Christine, can you describe your experience? This is really what we want to get into today. Your experience of implementing an on-demand team into your firm for the first time, and how's it been going year over year?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I think to Paul's point, there's a lot of different models, right? So we're looking at true staffing agencies and more offshoring of certain talent. But when we look at the on-demand teams, we really found that, we had a need for that senior level resource, right? That 3 to 6 year experience, and, didn't have enough talent with the growth that we were seeing. And so our experience was really positive. I will say there's always, with everything new, things that you have to think about, challenges we faced. Just thinking, while you guys are great at thinking about how do you onboard, there's also the logistics of working with our HR team, right? Do background checks sync up together, and, just all of those nuances. And so I would say last year, the first time through, we definitely had some learning curve. But I think when we sat down and thought about this as a long-term strategic solution, we definitely feel like being able to supplement that peak season is just critical for our teams, for the, balance of resources, and also just, being able to, in the summer, if we pick up a new project, having that on-demand talent has been really critical. So, I think just the training, the technology, engaging your HR team, having all of those teams at the table to figure out what does it mean to onboard somebody who isn't a full-time person, what training do they need, how do we get them access to that information very quickly and get them ramped up so that they can be successful has been top of mind for us.
Great, thanks, Christine. And I'm going to stick with you for a little bit. So you mentioned Macozy is just one tool in your toolkit, but how has Macozy or an on-demand solution, how does that fit into the different options that you have, and what's been your kind of on-the-ground experience? What are you hearing from your partners and managers?
Yeah, I think this is a great way to supplement our teams. Certainly, while we talk about COVID being a lazy excuse, it's also one that I think got a lot of buy-in, right? All of our teams were remote. So does it matter if somebody is sitting outside my office or not is a wildly different answer anymore. So being able to bring in virtual teammates that could also supplement our hours, right? So, there are some challenges with time differences, but there's also a lot of benefits, right? Our managers could review something and hand it off and have a senior that can be working on it kind of throughout our early wee mornings. And then it's, they can touch base and see where they're at when everybody's back together in the morning on the Eastern time zone. So, we found it's a good strategic solution for us in just peaking, our peak season and being able to bring in people, but also just having, a diverse team that sits elsewhere. And like, we had a client in the UK and they loved our on-demand teammate because they were they were kind of in the middle. So we're finding it to be a good strategic partnership for that audit busy season, or just, those needs in our accounting and auditing space throughout the year.
Great, thank you, Christine. So Patty, great question. You've actually just stolen my thunder, because that was actually my next query to you, Christine, is training. How do you train up consultants for day one? Maybe just kind of talk us through, what's needed to get someone ready to function at your firm.
Yeah, I think, we are really looking at what does it take when somebody experienced joins the firm, right? Whether they're a Makosi consultant or another similar on-demand talent or somebody from another firm, individuals are coming in with a really solid accounting and auditing background. And so we don't need that foundational necessarily, but what are our audit methodologies, right? What tools do we use? What do they need to be successful and know about DHG, from our culture to our client service guidelines, and just sitting down and mapping out what are those critical items for somebody new to the firm so that they can, hopefully get up and running. One thing I think is critically important is that hands-on application. So just prior to that first engagement, being able to get in our tools, right? Get in the audit software, make sure they can log in, they can get a feel for it, because there's always going to be those nuances. But our training plan, we've kind of opted for a little bit more of a self-serve model in viewing some of the training, just because we had talent that was joining us at different periods, right? We might have somebody early in January or somebody coming in on demand in February, but supplementing that with office hours with our methodology team, or having, ways and points of contact for them where they can kind of go through that practical application as well.
Great, thank you. Paul, you obviously work with 100 plus firms globally. I mean, anything you'd want to add just around training and getting consultants ready for day one?
Yeah, I think each firm is obviously very different in terms of what training they have and their approach to that training. But our role in that, again, is not for us to come in and tell firms how they should be training people up, but really help facilitate that. Because I think one of the big lessons that we've learned is that, you kick off busy season, okay, you thought you needed, X amount of auditors. And then that partner comes in and said, hey, I've just won another piece of work, or we've just had another batch of resignations 6 weeks in. And to then stop your whole organization to go and train up, even if they're Makosi guys, is very, very cumbersome and disruptive. So you want to make sure that you lean on an organization like Makosi to say, okay, guys, you need to do 80, 90% of the lift. And if that's just getting the NDA signed, helping with independence checks, getting them access to the technology, all of those like high volume, low value tasks that sit around just getting someone onboarded, that's really where we can come in and support. So the firm themselves can focus on what they do best in terms of their end clients, making sure they're showing up and delivering a really good experience there. Because that's just the nature in terms of how we work with the client. So, and we've got that so good that we can get profiles around in about 48 hours and get people started in as little as a week in the virtual construct. So, because ironically, one of the weird things that we're seeing right now is that this staffing problem is such a systemic challenge. I'm speaking to managing partners that are getting frustrated where they're bringing like new opportunities to the table, and even their partners' guys that are incentivized by business development are avoiding taking on new work because they're just, they're overworked, they're burnt out, they don't know if they can execute it in a meaningful way. And it's frustrating for firms because we're hearing so many firms are getting double-digit growth right now, but then other firms are struggling. They're like, we could be in that bucket. We just don't know how to go and execute that work. And again, just reducing those variables from a firm perspective is so helpful. And again, getting people back to where they should be operating, rather than this, Mike touched on this right at the start, that we see, managers doing senior work, seniors doing second year work, and everyone being pulled down a rung in the ladder. And again, it's very damaging to culture. People will put up for it for a certain point, but after a while, people are going like, this just isn't it. I should be having chats about becoming a partner. I'm a senior manager right now. I'm doing manager level work, and we're not having those conversations. So I went off a little bit of a tangent there, but I think it's just that holistic approach to training to really take away those high volume, low value tasks that sit around getting people ready for day one.
Thank you, Paul. And I want to kind of stick with this theme of pre-work before really rolling out the on-demand team. And Paul and Christine, you both mentioned culture, which I think is really critical, as it relates to an overall workforce strategy. Wayne, I would love to hear your opinion too. How does an on-demand solution impact culture, and what are some key considerations?
It's a great question, and I think the answer is different for each firm. As Paul said, there's no one size fits all approach. Just from my own personal experience, back in 2017, we started to embrace an on-demand strategy to a limited extent. And I think it really starts with the buy-in from the business. And by that, the business, I mean, it's the managers, the senior managers and the partners on the ground. being supporters of the process, understanding the process. So one of the things that we do, one of the things that we did in 2017 at Grant Thornton, one of the things we're doing now at McCosy is making sure there's an education component of what to expect, what the on-demand model is, and from a best practices standpoint, and then socializing that information throughout the organization. You're not going to have 100% raving fans of the on-demand model. The objective is to have, broad buy-in of the on-demand model, again, of the managers, the supervisors that are going to be supervising the consultants that are on the ground. Frankly, the success or the failure really is at that inflection point, so that you have, again, those managers, senior managers, and partners being supporters of the process. And frankly, everybody, if you have that, everybody wins. The client wins, the consultant, the contractor wins, the folks in Christine's position win, and ultimately the professionals on the ground win, because their bandwidth is automatically increased. And I'll squeeze in an answer that I wanted to give to a later question, but I think it fits into this question a little bit better. One of the dynamics that I think is going to emerge right after the pandemic, and it will end, I assure everybody it will end, at least I hope it will end, otherwise we'll all be dead and it'll be a moot point, is that particularly from an audit standpoint, our services have always been, the demand model has come from other outside stakeholders, whether it be regulated SEC on the public side, whether it be banks, lenders, and other stakeholders on the private side. And there really has been largely bereft of any value add component to the audit cycle, the rendering of audit services. If I put my crystal ball in front of me, what I really see happening 1, 2, 3, 4 years out, the firms that are really going to succeed coming out of the pandemic are the ones that can truly invoke some level of value add into the otherwise compliance-driven audit process. And the only way to me, one of the only ways to do that is to free up your best and brightest folks in the middle of the organization. Again, those seniors, those high-performing seniors, managers, and the senior managers, to free themselves from the mind-numbing exercise of checklists and reporting up and reporting down in timesheets, to use their brains and really deliver those value-added solutions to the clients that they're servicing, outside of the construct of what the ASC says, or the latest FASB emerging topic that's coming out, or the SEC edict that's coming out, or worrying about whether I'm independent or not. It's what value-add solution can you drive home to your clients.
Thank you, Wayne. Christine, how do you integrate consultants, or how do you, with your teams, your culture, as well as your clients?
Yeah, I think really trying to focus on aligning them with, a geography, an industry, a partner or manager group. Still building that connection we think is super important. So, while it may not be that in-person connection, having that team around them that they can go to, they can feel comfortable asking questions, and that there's some level of responsibility, right? Yes, these are not our full-time employees, but in some cases they're with us for 4, 5, 6 months. So we want them to have, a meaningful experience in that connection. So that's kind of been our main focus, is trying to build that early connectivity, and just setting them up for success with a team around them, and helping them understand our culture, right? So if they don't understand how we operate at DHG, it's not, not necessarily going to be a great fit. So some of that's just upfront training, but some of it's on the job, right? Partnering them with great mentors and coaches within the firm as well, so that they have that experience. And they want to come back, right? Because like you said, the value proposition with somebody returning year over year and being able to come back in busy season the following year is great. But if they're not having a great experience, they're not going to want to return either. So that's kind of how we've been trying to tackle it. Again, we're going into really solidly, or for, second year. So we don't have it all figured out, but we are trying.
Thanks, Christine. And just a quick follow-up question there as it relates to integration. How does the technology piece work, right? Because these resources are not sitting next to you in Atlanta where you are. So how does the technology setup work?
Yeah, so not providing our own hardware was definitely a unique experience, and really leaning into the virtual desktop environment was something our technology team spent a lot of effort on last year. So hopefully we have some good lessons, but we found it's been pretty successful. There's always going to be technology hiccups, but working with McCosy and other vendors who, with that on-demand, are taking a lot of the day-to-day management. So if your consultant has an issue, there's also an IT team on your side that can help us with that, has been really valuable. We did find making sure our IT team was available during all of the business hours that our consultants, our internal teammates, and our on-demand teammates were available was important. So that was one integration item that we ended up finding. was expanding that a little bit was beneficial. But just that upfront time and getting people set up on the virtual desktop's been immensely helpful.
Thank you, Christine. I want to share Trish Orlando's question because I think it's pertinent and very relevant to where we are right now in the conversation. So maybe over to you, Paul, but essentially Trish says, you addressed how the on-demand consultants are trained on software. However, what about compliance work and ensuring that accounting standards for that country/province are followed, or are the consultants only for audit engagements? Maybe Paul first, and then Christine, if you have anything to add.
Gotcha. Okay, so I think for us, it really depends on what level of experience you're bringing them in. But as a rough rule of thumb, what you will find that our guys can do is do 85 to 95% of the lift from an audit perspective. And then that frees, to Wayne's point, that last 5%, the stuff that engages your brain and you have to think and be creative, that's where your full-time employee should be coming in. And so it really helps with that employee engagement piece. And we've been able to deploy with the same people in 11 countries around the world with firms. We work with all of the big four, all the way down to like 10-person shops. And we've been successful on that. So that's our best approach. And then in terms of, is it only for audit engagement? So the areas that we cover external, IT, internal, and then we do advisory, so transaction advisory work as well. The only bit that we cannot help with is tax. It's because it's very regional specific and it's not scalable. And we just don't want to get into that bucket of a staffing company whereby it's a crapshoot whether this person's going to work out or not. So we just kind of help with those kind of two main areas. But again, we work with doing review and compilation work and, locally held firms, owner operated firms, all the way through to PCOB clients. And so we really cover the spectrum there. And that's actually where we use our technology to really understand your end client base and how do we kind of best serve that? Because it's just not helpful. If you're dealing with a lot of local owner operated companies and we give you a big four auditor that's only ever worked on PCOB clients, he's probably not going to be that successful versus someone that can come in, do the review comp and the audit, and they're used to moving from engagement to engagement, every few days or every week or 2 weeks, whatever it might be. So hopefully, Trish, that answered your question there.
Hey, Paul, one more point with respect to answering that question. Maybe you can, but I think implicit in that also is maybe you can talk a little bit about the Luna platform and how requisitions can be curated in terms of solutions specific to a framework, an auditing and accounting framework or specific industry experience. And it's not just, hey, we need a 3-year senior associate. Here's a 3-year senior associate. It could be a 3-year senior associate that's steeped in US GAAP or IFRS or any other local GAAP in any other jurisdiction around the world.
Yeah, so our technology platform comes in two ways. So we can get very specific. We got rid of resumes simply for the fact we just thought they were useless. You look at 100 auditor resumes and they all look exactly the same, and it doesn't really tell you what they've done to really help you align where these talents is going to work best. So our technology platform not only breaks down their industry, but how much time that they've spent in that industry. And then we don't publish this data, but we have their historical client size data. So again, that's very, very helpful for us to align on. And then technical pieces as well. We've identified that through our technology platform. And that includes also like audit methodology. So if it's caseware, or if it's CCH or Pro System Engage, whatever it might be, again, just having that information. And then Ryan and his team, this is where they come in, they'll work with our clients to build that client specific playbook. And that incorporates everything around their methodology. So, and what are the key KPIs and what are the pitfalls here? And then we manage to that via our technology platform. Because the last thing you want to do is, say, someone in Christine's situation, you don't want to come to the end of busy season and found that like the McCosy person wasn't senior enough or didn't have enough of X industry experience. So we map that out through these sessions that Ryan, we call them firm DNA, and then we integrate that back into our technology platform. Then our technology platform gathers light but frequent feedback from the client's managers to say, how's Paul doing? Is he delivering on time, on budget, at the quality that you expect? And then we share that information very frequently with everyone. So ahead of time, like, are we actually showing up and delivering for that work? And if there's any coaching opportunities that we need to close any gaps, we're ahead of that. So it's just taking that more holistic approach. pre, during, and even post engagement to kind of tackle this.
Well, and I would maybe just put a plus sign behind something, Paul, you hit on, which is really the ability to define your requirements. So whether it's an industry or size of clients, I mean, I think the experience from going week to a different client is very different than some of our big four consultants that maybe do work on one client for, weeks or months on a time. So that I think is critically important for companies and firms considering this, is really digging in on what do you need, right? Like, is it the communication with the client? Is it, what are those experiences? And the portal is super helpful because you can see all of that. But I would say as a firm, just really making sure you understand your requirements and communicate those as effectively as possible is very helpful for making sure you get good fits.
Yeah, that's such a good point, Christine. I think, you ask 10 firms what an audit senior is and you get 10 different answers back. So, and especially with larger firms, you can ask managers and you'll get 10 different answers back as well. So just really getting granular on that. We spend a lot of time there. I don't know, Ryan, if you want me to jump into this next question that's come up by Danielle.
Yeah, I think Danielle's question, I definitely want to get into managing teams on site, but to answer Joyce's very questions, just in terms of really pre-deployment and CPE requirements for Yellow Book. So a very quick answer to that is that at least as far as Macozy goes, a lot of the consultants do have that CPE that they've taken through various vendors online, or if they need it prior to starting, the consultants will take that CPE credit. And the client, for example, DHG is not charged for that time. Training is really our investment into the relationship. So Joyce, if you have any follow-up questions on that, please feel free to drop it in the chat. But getting into, beyond day one, yeah, Paul, absolutely. How does it work when it comes to time zones, communicating, with DHG's managers, for example? What platforms are used? Can you speak to that?
I'll ask that last question first because it's the simplest. So in terms of platforms that we'll use, these are going to come in just like your full-time employees would, right? So however you guys have set up your employees, we try and replicate that as close to 100% as possible. So it creates very simple processes, or simpler processes for your technology teams in terms of getting them set up and ready for day one. We guarantee 6 to 7 hours worth of overlap every single day. And this was a big question for us coming into COVID, with how do we do this? And so every engagement even if it's just one person for 6 weeks, they come with an engagement manager. They're essentially our audit manager. And what they do with your team, there's no cost for this person. There's no additional cost for this person. But what they do, they map out and they work with our teams to say, okay, to over communicate to your managers, say, okay, the next 24 hours, this is what the 10 things I'm going to work on. And then when your guys are offline, we're working on them. And then when they're online, then you've got 6 to 7 hours worth of overlap to work on client calls, team huddles, ad hoc stuff, the stuff that you just can't schedule. They've done 8 out of the 10 things, and then they've got questions on those last 2. So it actually creates a very efficient process in terms of actually delivering the work and making sure that when we are online together, we can use it for those high value tasks rather than just a lot of administrative stuff. And it's been very, very successful. And I'd like to say that we planned this, but some of the larger engagements that we've worked on, we've actually found that the engagements finish earlier than we anticipated because there's efficiencies in that. It's nice when you're not getting, your email isn't blowing up and Teams or whatever you might be using, or Slack or something like that is pinging every couple of seconds. You just get your head down and get through the work.
Thank you, Paul. Christine, anything you'd want to add from your experience in terms of communication, time zones, above and beyond what Paul said?
No, I mean, we use Teams, we use Zooms. I mean, we use the same communication methods that we do internally. What I think was critically important is just really sitting down and understanding with each consultant kind of what works best, right? Some audit teams, even in the US, right, are more morning teams versus night teams. It was just that upfront communication of, hey, how do I want to receive points? Is it throughout the day? Do I want you to hold them and bundle them? But sitting down and just understanding what works for the engagement manager and team versus, the consultant's schedule. We found all of our folks tended to be super flexible. And if we just had those early conversations about how the teams like to interact, was it an email or was it on Teams, that really positioned them for better success.
Great, thank you, Christine. Trish, to get to your question, so how quick is the turnaround to have a consultant ready when there is a not planned need? So we're getting into that time of year where resignations really, really hurt, or a new business might come in and your firm might be scrambling. So I guess, Paul, maybe you want to take that one. How long does it take to get a consultant, ready when that need was not anticipated?
Ironically, actually getting profiles in front of clients is the easy bit for us. It's actually the other bits about building out these playbooks, getting time with technology, just making sure that you feel really comfortable there. We've spoke with HR and planning team, so we know that, like, okay, they are employees, they have indefinite NDAs, but you might have specific NDAs that you want them to do, or you might have independence requirements that you want them to go through. And so it really varies from client to client. So we can do it extremely quickly in a virtual environment, anywhere from around a week. But again, in that first engagement, you want to kind of anticipate probably 2 to 3 weeks, just so we can get those, have meaningful conversations up front around really understanding your firm. So we set our guys up for success when they're coming in for day one, and really then working back from there. So Ryan and his team, they'll probably have 3 to 4 dedicated 45-minute calls to start to build out that playbook. And that's really just like an in-depth interview with different members in your team. Getting you set up in the portal is very simple, but then having dedicated calls with technology as well to making sure that they feel very comfortable with what we're agreeing to and what we're setting up and the way that we do that, do some test dry runs and things like that. So anticipate 2 to 3 weeks, but there's a few things there.
The questions are rolling in. I absolutely love it from the audience. Thank you so much. Christine, when it comes to managing your on-demand teams, your consultants, kind of post day one, what are the feedback mechanisms that you use? How do you evaluate the success of each consultant?
Yeah, well, I would say it kind of depends on the vendor. So obviously you guys referred to your portal where you collect a lot of that feedback, the quick hit feedback. We've had similar experience with some of the other groups that we've worked with where they're collecting feedback. And a lot of times if that's already happening, I might just be connecting with our main point of contact and making sure we're all on the same page about what's being communicated. But we also do lift up for our internal teams, like, hey, if you're having issues, reach out to, if it's myself and my resource managers or, a variety of people internally, so that we're addressing any of those opportunities very quickly, or just understanding how it's going so we can work with you guys and have that back and forth. But managing the teams day to day, I mean, we really lean on our engagement teams that have the client work scheduled to, work with the group, help make sure their client work is coming in. I lean on my resource managers a lot just to facilitate, but we really want our teams to utilize our on-demand consultants just as they would another senior assigned to their engagement.
Thank you, Christine. And a follow-up question for you from Patty. How do you capture the time for your on-demand talent for your own internal client billing system?
Well, that is a great question. That is actually an opportunity that we figured out. We wanted to come up with a better way. So last year it was an Excel template that we were importing into our software. We're actually coming up with an app that's going to help interact so that the consultants can see the engagements they're assigned to and enter time. So they're not working directly in our main financial system, but finding that way with IT to import the time in an effective way was definitely one of those upfront things. When Paul was saying that the 2 to 3 week window of figuring out what all hurdles you're going to have to overcome and how you're going to do that, I would say time entry was one of those for us. And we found kind of an Excel template was fine. The consultants could track their time, and then we consolidated and load it once a week, basically.
Hey, Ryan, just to, I'm not espousing a best practice here. Grant Thornton, back at least when I was there in 2019, took a little bit different tack than that. We did incorporate contract resources into our CMS timekeeping system, obviously with a code that they were contractors. And furthermore, the bill rate that came through essentially as an out-of-pocket expense. So that was a mechanism to track, and I'd be happy to talk to you offline about this, Christine, and you can maybe pick and choose in terms of what works well, what doesn't work as well. But by coming through as an out-of-pocket expense, it sort of supported the engagement profitability mindset that we wanted our managers to have relative to the cost of contractors on the engagements.
Yeah, thank you, Wayne. Katie, I see your question. I think it's a great one, and we will definitely get to it, but I just want to kind of stick with the mechanisms here because we're getting technical and it's great. But I guess Wayne or Christine here, in line with your quality control document, how are job evaluations handled and affecting peer reviews? So Wayne, maybe you can take that.
One thing I learned over the years was to say I don't know when I don't know. This is like give you a personal editorial here. I think it's really important from a quality, and we obviously had tremendous resources poured into the quality control function in the firm, given the size and breadth of our SEC practice. But we did, similar to using them for time reporting in our native CMS system, the contractors and the engagement they're on were subject to the same levels of engagement review as if they were FTE. So it was completely a non-event, the fact that they were contractors or coded as contractors. And that was important because, as I think the question implies, when peer reviewers came in, when external PCAOB inspectors came in, internal review folks from our national office came in, they want to see those quality control reports, those staff reviews, whether they were for contractors or FTEs, to get a sense for the overall quality control environment of the local office, the regional practice, and the overall quality control function of the firm. So again, there's different ways to skin that cat, but that's the way we did it.
Great, thank you, Wayne. Christine, from your perspective, just as it relates to peer reviews, any contribution there?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would just say is, we do, put bios into our files so that we can kind of show the background and experience of the individual that's working with it. We have some, various memos around the training and supervision of contractors. So I don't think anything extraordinary to add there, but I would just encourage, if there's a professional services group or someone that's involved in, kind of risk assessment, having them involved in the front end of beginning to work with on-demand or variable talent groups. We had a lot of conversations just to make sure we felt good about our quality control and the supervision.
Okay, thank you, Christine. Sticking with you, how does the offboarding process work with consultants?
So typically, once we have identified that, we're coming to the end of the engagement, there are various groups that, we need to notify. So everyone from IT for turning off the virtual desktop to the engagement managers. So our consultants have a DHG email address, and, we'll have somebody on the engagement team retain access to that, just in case there's any client communications that may come through after the process. So we have kind of like an offboarding checklist, I would say, where everybody who has kind of a role in the offboarding is notified that, the contractor end date is coming. Here's the time that person's going to be rolling off. Make sure we have the time entry and all of that captured. But really for our group, we typically have the resource manager kick off the notification because they know when those engagements are starting to come to a close.
Great, thank you, Christine. So Paul, over to you, because I think Joyce has asked just a very tactical question here. Where does the firm go for a virtual desktop setup?
We would tackle that in our technology call, working with your IT teams. And again, we have best practices that we can bring in if it's not set up. So again, don't think that, hey, you need to have all of your ducks in a row when it comes to all of this stuff if you haven't had it before. Because again, you probably understand that, a vast majority of the firms on this call are a lot smaller than probably Christine's firm. So, we have stuff that we can do there. We do VDI, whether it's VPN, a Citrix network. There's multitudes of offers that we can kind of set up, whatever really suits that individual client specifically, in order to make sure that we've got a secure, reduced latency, but also just it's an efficient way for us to set up the teams. So really case by case basis. So it's not a very direct answer there, Joyce, but I think that's the best answer I can give on this call. But if you want to kind of go into that more detail, I'm happy to chat about that offline. There is one question actually that come up in the anonymous attendee asking, do firms ever hire people from the company? And I like this question. So the career path for people at McCosy is about 4 to 5 years in length. We are not an audit firm. If we're doing our job properly, we should see an increase in the number in people wanting to stick around and become partner, because we are finding that room to grow for firms. We are flattening that utilization curve and getting people back to what they're doing. So what we say with our clients, if you work with Paul for 2 busy seasons, 2 full seasons, you can take Paul full-time for free. So a lot of our clients will actually use us as a feeder system for their staffing, because we realize that this is a holistic problem. And yes, whilst probably there is that surge capacity need, there's also that capacity to help firms grow, and you need those rock stars year round, and you want them in the culture. And we acknowledge that if someone is showing interest on that partnership route or senior manager route, whatever it might be, we can't help facilitate that, but DHG and Christine can't. So let's not stand in the way of it there. And we're not a staffing company, so we don't do placement fees, but we do look for a minimum of two engagements on that. So a lot of our second and third year clients tend to use us as a bit of a feeder system, which is really cool to see. And then to answer Katie's question about kind of educating business leaders and managers, there's 2 ways that we can do that. Really upfront communications, just getting people on the call and just having them pepper us with questions. Everybody has a different approach and opinion. Secondly, we have a 100% referenceable client list. So again, like very much what we're trying to do here is like, don't listen to Paul, listen to Christine and listen from their experience. Was it positive? What lessons did they learn? What did they have to have organized? And we can do single point introductions as well to clients, especially of clients of your size as well, to really understand, or maybe industry focus, whatever it might be that's important to you. We can help with that. And that's really how we kind of get that buy-in, and just getting those conversations had up front, and then getting you chatting to our other clients. Let's get a community around this. This isn't just a, we're not a body shop.
Thank you, Paul. You're on a roll, so I'm going to ask you this next question too. Just can you quickly touch on what is the fee structure?
Yeah, it varies from engagement and size of team and the seniority that you want, but it's basically just a flat hourly rate. There's no setup fees, there's no surcharges, there's no hidden costs. And if the vast majority of our clients, we do fill in their client, the client's time system, and then we just invoice off of the back of it. So it becomes a very simple process for that. But on a case-by-case basis, depending on how long you need them for, what seniority you need them, if there's any really special technical roles that you're looking for, it varies a little bit. And then whether you need them on site or virtually as well. So pre-COVID, 95% of our teams were actually on site. So we were very much a glorified travel agency, and we take care of flights, visas, accommodation, all of that sort of stuff. And there's 2 different rates for the virtual teams versus the on-site teams. But the nice thing is you're pulling from the same talent pool. So regardless of where you need the guys, it creates something just very, very simple.
Ryan,
yeah, sure.
I'm sorry, please finish up. I have a question for Christine when you get done. So I'm sorry for interrupting you, Paul.
Yeah, but essentially you guys should be achieving 60%, GM targets with our guys, billing them out as full-time seniors, to give you an idea. Cool. I'm done now, Mike.
Okay. So thank you. Christine, quick question for you. There are obvious benefits to clients and to the firm for having this kind of outsourced consultant work. What were some unexpected benefits that you saw specifically for your team members, the on-staff, on-site, fully employed team members at DHG, by bringing this extra group in? What were some of the unexpected things that you experienced?
I mean, I think, in a lot of cases, the alternative to bringing in on-demand talent was that, right, people operating down and working at that lower level, right? Our managers having to step in and fill down or work directly with an associate. And so we certainly saw the benefit of having, the right leverage model with somebody who is kind of at that senior, heavy associate level in the mix, because they could take some of that, just project management or even staff development in some cases. I mean, we had some super seniors that were developing our staff. And, I think it was also just from a diversity standpoint, really interesting. I mean, I had a lot of great conversations with managers, and they're like, hey, I would have never known this, right? Or, I've made a connection with somebody who has some really great experiences I don't have. And so I think just also bringing a different point of view, a lot of these folks are coming from different countries, and there's different cultural norms. And I mean, talking about football or, it's just, that was something I really enjoyed, was listening to some of our teams that were able to say, hey, this was a really cool experience, right? And I made this connection and learned and expanded, my understanding of a new, just a new culture. So that was kind of cool to see, just that expansion of diversity, because that's something we continue to, just want to see among our teams. So definitely the lift, some of the training, but just really broadening our teams was cool.
Do you feel that it reduced your normal turnover by having some people who might have otherwise left because of all the other pressures that was taken away, so that your turnover rates were lower?
I think that that's a distinct possibility. I will say it's year one, right? And we're still kind of experiencing, I think, like everybody, a lot of the impact of the Great Resignation and just a lot of upheaval in the industry. But I do think that we've had some individuals that we've been able to lower their burden in busy season, that, this is definitely a strategy for us to make sure that we're taking that peak out and not burning out those key performers where we otherwise could have somebody helping them out.
Thank you, Christine. Just doing a time check. Wow, this hour has flown by. This has been really useful. Lorianne, I do see your question there. I'm going to ask Carly if you can just capture Lorianne's name, and we can send some more IT specific questions, because it's a whole another conversation, and definitely want to give you some more information on that. But just as we wrap it up here, I mean, really, Christine, I'll start with you, and then Wayne and Paul. But looking ahead, I mean, where do firms go from here, and how can they think about this strategically? I know that's a very broad question, but what should firms be thinking about right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all have to be thinking about, as we continue to grow and just have sustainability, right? Have enough people to serve our business. Just how do we manage that peak, right? And how do we, have these on-demand teams that when we have these projects that come in unexpectedly, we can have great partnerships with folks like Makosi that can help us meet that demand. So we're just continuing to think creatively, right? There's a lot of different strategies out there for contingent, gig, seasonal, on demand. And I think they're all, there's all application as we continue to go forward.
Thank you. Wayne, in a concise way, any parting thoughts?
Got it.
I think,
Is that a dig at me or wait?
No, that was a dig
Wayne.
at Christine. That was decidedly a dig at me and my ability to go on. I think I'll just piggyback off of Christine's comment, and I will be brief, I promise. I think that whether it's contingent, gig, or some other form, whatever you want to call it, strategy going forward is going to be the norm. So let's park that for a second. I think the challenge is going to be figuring out what that optimum mix is. It's going to be different for all the firms, whether it's 85-15, whether it's 90-10, 95-5. I can still do math even though I'm retired. And then, part and parcel to that is figuring out the best way to incorporate it into your fundamental culture, which again is different for each firm. And the analogy that I like to give on these sorts of things is, trying to imagine the restaurant industry 3 years ago pivoting to a carry-out model and meals on demand model, which I said, what? No, that's part of the experience is dining in. And largely the restaurant industry has been able to pivot to a whole new way of operating, a whole new way of doing business. So, those are the two things I think about going forward.
Thank you, Wayne. Paul, any parting thoughts? And also we'll ask you to be brief.
Geez, swinging. All right. I think, look, just from running Makosi, we're over 1,200 people now. And I think that the main thing that we're focused on is not being too dogmatic one way or the other. Because when you look at the survey data around this stuff, it's very polarizing. 50+% of people apparently focus best when they're in the office. But also 50% plus people have work best when they're at home. So I think really just empowering managers to really figure out what works best for their team and what the mission is they're trying to deliver to Wayne's very first point, right? So if you're working with a client that has huge opportunities for value add, having boots on the ground, having people walking the floors might be more advantageous versus a client that's maybe a little bit more by the book and you're just going through the numbers and you can leverage virtual teams in that way. So just really empowering that front line, and rather than having like a one rule fits all, and just avoiding that kind of just a dogmatic approach right now.
Thank you, Paul. So with that, I'd just like to thank the panelists for joining today, the audience for all of your great questions, and Mike for the opportunity today. So I'm going to turn it over to you, sir.
Great, thank you, Ryan, and thank you, Christine and Wayne and Paul and the whole team at Makosi. I think clearly firms are trying to figure out what is their hybrid model right now post-COVID. And this clearly is part of that conversation of who's physically in the office, who's remote but close by, who's remote but far away, and who might be these on-demand kind of consultants that are in there. All of that is part of the solution to help with the staffing problem. So we appreciate everybody joining us today. Appreciate the audience giving us an hour of your time as you learn about some of these solutions that exist out here. And we'll be following up with some additional information. If you're interested in contact information, Ryan, you want to just share what the next step is from your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will just drop, I guess it's easy to just drop my email in the chat. I lead client success at Macozy. I can be your best point of contact, so I'll put that there. You can also go to macozy.com. There's a lot of information there. You can get in touch with us that way. So thank you, everyone.
With that, thanks everybody. Appreciate everybody joining us today. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Cheers, Christine. Cheers, Mike. Thank you.
Thanks, Christine. Bye, guys.
Bye,
Thank
Ryan.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.